Okay, assalamu alaikum. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, Han.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Me and my friends, Ivond is Asma, Nurul Ismania, then Francisca. And Francisca will be presenting today an article that's written by Juliane House, discussing the topic text and context in translation. So let's start. First, we start by introducing the notion of context. What's the main definition of context? This article discusses the relationship between context and text for translation. According to the writer of this article, translation is understood as a theory of recontextualization that explicates the relationship between context and text in its design and categorical scheme. So mainly it's about discussing that translation can be interpreted or defined as a theory that focuses mainly on contextualization, and context makes a lot of difference when it comes to translation. The researcher or the writer introduces recent development in translation and multilingual text production, which may limit the scope of recontextualization in translation. Because according to the writer of that paper, he thinks that the scope of recontextualization in translation is way wider. That's why he tries to introduce recent developments related to translation and multilingual text production. So my part will mainly be covering those. The notion of context in different traditions, according to the writer of this paper, is divided into 5 aspects: the philosophical tradition, the psychological tradition, the pragmatics one, sociolinguistics, anthropological, and conversation analytical traditions, functional pragmatic, and systemic functional traditions. Those are the 5 introduced by him, and we're gonna explain each of them in detail. So the philosophical tradition. Um, it sounds like different when you try to talk about translation. Then it takes you about to talk about the context in different tradition, different aspects. The first one is philosophical one. Philosophers who have concerned themselves with language have viewed context as either something contributing to the inherent deficiency of a language as a tool for logical thought, or as something that's inherently worthwhile and constitutive or constituting conditio humana, the human logic. So it is the latter tradition which is of interest for translation, which is that context can be used as a tool for logical thought or something that's inherently part of our mind. When we talk, when we think, it's part of our human logic. According to Wittgenstein, 1958, he emphasized on language as a type of action. Wittgenstein recognized that the meaning of linguistic forms is their use, and the language is never used to simply describe the world around us, but functions inside actions, like language games, Sprachspielen, which are embedded in a form of life, Lebensform. That's to mean that that language is never used that simply to describe the world, but it describes the functions that we lead in our life. According to Austin, 1962, he emphasized the importance of context of a speech act for
Sorry, Hen.
linguistic. Yes, but
Your PowerPoint is still on the first page.
really?
Have
Oh,
you
yes.
moved your PowerPoint?
No, but
At least on my screen.
oh yes. How about everybody?
Mine as well.
Maybe
Yes,
maybe
Han.
you should
It is still
you should
recording.
click enable editing first, Han.
Now I am in the philosophical tradition. Can everybody see it?
Still
No?
in the first page. Still on the first page. So the title, and you see that the cover.
Okay. So just give me a minute. I try to share it again.
Yeah.
Just a minute. Is it visible now to everybody? Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Yes. Yes, Han.
Yes, Han.
Yeah, it is. Okay, yeah.
Is it fixed now? I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Just a minute. So about the philosophical tradition, we were talking about discussing some opinion. The first one was that of Wittgenstein, that emphasized in language as a type of action. That language, we do not use the language to describe the world around us, but to mainly describe the functions that we lead, like in a form of life, Lebensform. So according to Austin, 1962, he emphasized the importance of the context. Sorry, he emphasized the importance of context of a speech act for linguistic production and interpretation in the form of sociocultural convention. So it's through these conventions that the force and type of speech act is determined. That's mainly Austin, different from Wittgenstein, focused on context of a speech act and the power of speech act, like the role played by speech act defining the meaning that we want to deliver. And he focused on Austin perceives that to perform a speech act depends on the relevant felicity conditions. I don't know if any of us studied pragmatics before or not. Me, I studied pragmatics, and we studied something called felicity conditions that talks about the maxims that defines our conversation and help us to be holding conversation with each other, conversing with each other easily and understanding each other if we stuck to those maxims or felicity conditions. So that was Austin's opinion. And that's mainly about the philosophical tradition that focused on language or the human logic as something that inherently part of our mind. It's not something that contributing to the deficiency of language, but rather a tool that help us to deliver our logic. So, according to Gadamer, 1986 to 1995, he emphasized that the role of conventions, which are, in his opinion, taken for granted, hidden, continuous, and beyond consciousness. That Gadamer thinks that we do those conventions and consider those traditions or those contextual aspects subconsciously. We do it subconsciously. We don't focus on doing them, but they are already there in our mind, hidden, and we do them for granted. We don't think that we want to do them on purpose. We just do them like for granted. According to Popper, 1989, he believed in the changeability of conventions and the necessity of critically reflecting on and revisiting them. So Popper thinks that we're not supposed to take those traditions or contextual aspects for granted. We're supposed to focus on them and consciously focus and keep revisiting them and see. And he believes that they are changeable. So Gadamer emphasizes the inherent limitations of both reflection and criticism, and he insists on the immutable character of context dependence. So Gadamer thinks that the context being dependent on context is something that it's supposed to change, is not being stuck at the same point. We should think about them and think that they are changeable, and we shouldn't think that something's taken for granted. He argues that context dependence and its attendant culture specific must involve an absence of self-awareness. Mainly, Gadamer and Popper introduced different views. So Gadamer thinks that we shouldn't be taking them for granted because they can be changeable. So, for example, because it's dependent on culture. So, if it depends on culture, it means that for sure it's gonna be changeable. Because if we didn't consider culture, and if we didn't think that it was changeable, it's gonna be including absence of self-awareness, and Gadamer opposes it. So let's move to the psychological tradition. According to Grice, 1975, Grice assumed the operation of certain conversational maxims. So that takes us again to the maxims of pragmatics. Uh, Grice believes that those maxims guide the conduct of talk and stem from fundamental rational considerations of how to realize conversational ends. Those maxims express a general cooperative principle and specify how participants cooperate together and coordinate the conversation between themselves so they can converse normally and deliver the message that they want to deliver. Participants should speak sincerely, clearly, and relevantly and provide sufficient information for their partners. So, mainly those maxims about speaking sincerely, to deliver whatever you want to deliver in a sincere way, and to be clear, to be to the point, and to be relevant. You're not supposed to talk about something that has nothing to do with the point that you want to deliver, and you're supposed to provide enough information, because if you didn't provide enough information, the message will be lacking accuracy. So, in Grice's view, speech is regarded as action, and it can be explained in terms of beliefs and purposes of the actors. Grice's theory is thus an essence of psychological or cognitive theory of rhetoric. I highlighted those words because about those maxims, it's mainly this is the essence of psychological or cognitive theory of rhetoric. Because you as a speaker, for example, when you're talking to someone else, and then you decided the psychological element is there, controlling the way you think, the way you want to deliver your message. If you didn't want to be accurate, maybe you think subconsciously, maybe you don't like that person. That's why you don't want to tell him uh, enough information. You're gonna be misleading him. You're not talking sincerely because you don't like him. He asking you to go to a party with him and you don't like him, so you just give vague information. You give something like ambiguous because you don't like him. Because so this is just an example, but that shows how the psychological tradition controls our logic and the context that we deliver. So context is defined by Sperber and Wilson 1986 as a set of premises used in interpreting an utterance. It's a cognitive construct and a subset of the hearer's assumptions about the world. Because, for example, Sadaf or Sarfaraz are telling me a story, but they want me to be directed to the assumptions that they want to deliver. So they tell me something in a way different from the fact, and I believe the way they deliver the message. Maybe it's not the truth, but then those are the premises or the assumptions delivered by them. They wanted me to believe, and they wanted to shape my own truth. Um, For Sperber and Wilson, context doesn't comprise external situational cultural factors, but it is rather achieved as a cognitive environment, implying the mental availability of internalized environmental factors in individuals' cognitive structure. If we're talking about psychological tradition, it means that cognitive process is included as well. Because our mind is the one responsible for shaping or taking those steps. If I want to be clear, if I want to be unrelevant. So, yeah, it's mainly the psychological element is defined also as a cognitive process. So that takes us to the principle of relevance. According to Clark, 1996, we should be focusing on individual cognitive processes and their social conditioning in concrete acts of language use. Language use is regarded as a form of joint action that's done in a collaborative way by speakers and hearers who form an ensemble. So we have like an institution or maybe a contract agreement between the speaker and hearer, so we can form a conversation or have a conversation, a successful one. If you didn't want to hear, or we didn't want to stick to the traditions of conversation, we won't be able to converse easily. So according to Clark, 1996, language use arises in joint activities. We're having joint activities, and if we didn't have that, we won't be able to converse easily. So activities which are closely bound up with context vary according to goals and other dimensions, such as formal versus informal, egalitarian versus autocratic, as well as other participant-related variables that controls or takes part in defining our conversations. So this is the psychological notions. Mainly has to do with relevance factor. It captures what speakers bring with them to a joint activity, their prior knowledge, beliefs, assumptions, all of which accumulate in the course of activity. If we're talking with each other, all those elements that we have in our knowledge or background, cultural background, and previous knowledge, they are accumulated there in our minds and define the way that conversation goes. It's kind of accumulative. Um, so that was about the psychological one. I hope it's clear. This is a pragmatic tradition, and I think most of you already knows that, because pragmatic, whenever we say context, it takes us to pragmatics. Pragmatics is all about context, conversation and context. So according to Stolnaker, 1999, he said that syntax studies sentences, semantics studies propositions, pragmatics is a study of linguistic acts and contexts in which they are performed. Can everybody can hear me? Because I'm worried because I keep speaking. I just want to make sure that everybody's still here.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes.
Okay, just make sure. Okay. According to Levinson, pragmatic is a theory of language understanding that takes context into account. As the underlying assumption here is that in order to arrive at an adequate theory of relation between linguistic expression and what they express, we should be considering context in the first place. The relationship between content and context is however, never a one-way street. So um, you shouldn't be just focusing on context and ignoring content, and vice versa. You should be focusing on both of them. According to Oates, we could say that a universal design feature of language is that it is context sensitive. If we didn't consider context seriously, no way that you would be able to deliver the meaning or have a normal conversation successful. About sociolinguistic, anthropological, and conversation analytical tradition, the notion of context here is of inherent discipline constitutive interest for a number of reasons. It also considers sociolinguistic, anthropological, and conversation analytical traditions. Um, the first one is the feature of face-to-face interaction are both a primary example of context and an elementary example of human social organization. Face-to-face interactions make a lot of difference and help us to consider the context really well. If we didn't do that, we wouldn't be able to deliver or have a successful conversation as well. So the second point, the way token interaction is designed and shaped features of social situation, sheds light on organization of language itself. And finally, interactions have to accomplish understanding aided by context. So mainly, It's also about context, but this time it has to do with sociolinguistic aspects, anthropological ones as well. Functional, pragmatic, and systematic functional a tradition. According to Elish and Rabin, 1979, he introduced the concept of context theory. It treats both cognitive knowledge and social factors, which are seen to influence one another. Of course, social factors and cognitive knowledge um, have a mutual relation, they affect each other. Then, according to the functional pragmatic approach, the speech situation is defined as action and situation in which linguistic form, such as personal pronouns, sentence, modality, contextually determine values. So, this is mainly about constellation. So, what do we mean by constellation? Constellation, mainly about those questions. The questions that we have, command, assertion, which is recognized as being both ontologically and genetically primary importance. According to Halliday, the preference for using a textual functional explanation combined with a detailed description of linguistic expression in both their oral and written context. Halliday believes that it's mainly about when it comes to translation, we should be focusing on written rather than oral text, because context is taken to be more than a set of prefix Greek variables. So, such that language shapes context as much context shapes language. So, it's a mutual relation. Context shapes language and vice versa. Those traditions, the task of translating when considering contextualization consists of enacting a discourse out of the written text as I explained earlier. Now, Ivond and Inshallah, oh, not me. Oh, sorry. Context cannot be regarded in translation as dynamics identity. Truth to the nature, because translation is a written text, right? So the realization of discourse is going to be presented in a written form. Then we should be considering imaginary hidden interaction between writer and reader. So translator can overcome this and should be should be going beyond the meaning and be able to achieve the context that's supposed to be delivered by linking both text to both the old and new context and creating a new identity in his own mind. Um, I think I already explained that because we're running out of time. Maybe now we start with Yvonne. She's going to be talking about recontextualization theory of translation and assessing its validity. Okay?
Yeah.
Sorry, the article is quite complicated, but we tried to make it as simple as we could. And now, Yvonne, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you, Han.
Yeah,
Good
most welcome.
afternoon, sir. Yeah. Good afternoon, Sir Munlimmin and friends. I will continue to the next part. Here we have a recontextualization theory of translation and assesses its validity. So actually, the author also brought some theories here to support the recontextualization theory. The first, we have a systematic functional theory of translation as a recontextualization. This theory first developed in house uh, in those years, and also actually this is based on Halliday's systematic functional theory. One of the fundamental concepts of this theory is equivalence. Equivalence is a relative concept in several aspects, such as source and target languages with their specific cultural structural constraints, the translation, comprehension, and interpretation of the genre original and her creativity, her of his creativity, and translation tradition in the target culture, interpretation of the original by its author, and etc. So actually, equivalence is determined by socio-historical conditions in which the translation act is embedded and by the range of often irreconcilable and contextual factors. So that's why translation can be understood as text that is contextually bound because on the one hand it is contextually embedded source text, and on the other hand it is also recipient's communicative contextual condition. This is also called as the double linkage, or also well known as equivalence relation and conceptual heart of translation. Next slide, please.
Ivonda, can you see it?
No, no hand.
Okay. I don't know what's the problem today because yeah, every time it works perfect. Yeah. Just a minute, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you see it now?
Still no. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and next part is Halidayan contextual concept of field, mode, and tenor. Before we come to this, I would like to explain first that there are three aspects of meaning that actually important in translation. The first is semantic, second is pragmatic, and the last is textual aspect. So as previously explained by Hand, that equivalent in text is important to relate it to semantic and pragmatic, or aka semantically a source language. I'm sorry, I mean like the replacement of a text in the source language by semantically and pragmatically should be equivalent in the target language. So the first requirement for the equivalence is a text should be a translation text should have function equivalent as the original text. And since we are talking about the reconceptualization here, we will take a deeper look about the textual aspect. Here we have three ideas proposed by Halidayan about the contextual concepts. The first is fields, second is mode, and tenor. You probably can read it by yourself, but I will try to read it to you. First, field. Field captures special activity and topic with differentiation of degrees of generality, specificity, or granularity in lexical items. Second, tenor refers to the nature of the participants and the relationship between them in terms of social power, distance, degree, and or of emotional charge. And the third is mode refers to the both of the channels, spoken or written, and the degree to which potential or real participation is allowed for between writer and reader. Okay, next slide, please, Han.
Can you see it now, Ivonda?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So here is the chart explained about those 3 points: fields, tenor, and mode. Actually, there's not much explanation about these three items, so I couldn't give a concrete example about it. Probably this can be the case for our discussion after presentation, or Paul Munlimmin would like to help us to understand it eloquently after this presentation. Okay, so let's move to the another slide.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and before that we have three terms: field, tenor, and mode. And there are also two
Yes,
important
yes.
terms here, which is genre and register. Again, you can read it yourself, but I would like to read it to you, okay? Genre is incorporated in the analytic scheme in between as it were the register categories and the textual function. Register refers to the relationship between text and context. So what's the difference between register and genre? Register captures the connection between text and their micro context, while genre captures the connection between text with my context, the linguistic and cultural community. The next slide, please. Okay, that's the difference between next we can
Yes.
yeah, this is the chart, same chart from previous chart, register and genre. So the register have to still tenor and mode while genre is standing alone. Next slide, please.
Yes.
Okay, the next theory we have here is two types of translation. There are two types of translation, overt and covert translation. Overt translation that receptors of translation are quite overtly not being directly addressed. For example, the works of art and aesthetic creation with a distinct historical meaning, political speeches on religious sermons. While cover translation is a translation which enjoys the status of original source target culture, for example, stories, education booklets, or computer manuals. And the next slide.
Can you see it, Ivonda?
Yes, yes. So what's the difference between open translation and proper translation? Proper translation is the translation text is embedded in the new speech event, which also gives it a new frame and context. While proper translation, on the other hand, is the translator attempts to recreate as far as possible an equivalent speech event. And also the last point, over translation can be equivalent in the level of language text and register as well as genre, while cover translation can be achieved at the levels of genre and individual textual function. So Han, please go back to the chart. I'll try to explain
Yes.
about the last point.
This one, right?
Yes, yes. So as I said before, that offered translation can be equivalent in the level of language text and register. Can we see that the language text and register are based on my understanding? That could be equivalent in the language text and register because since this is over translation is more complex because it relates to the like religions, history, art, and politics. Or the translation should be timeless or to be honest as possible. That's why the language or text here we can translate it as literal. This is from my own understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong after this. And also in register part in yeah in register. And also while cover translation could be equivalent in the level of genre and individual textual. So it is cover translation is more less complex and more deceptive than over translation, or it is also known that the translators can express acts of betraying. So he or he can translate it to the contextual function, more like it shouldn't be like be honest as honest as possible. As long as the meaning of the text can be delivered, then that's okay. That's why first we have here is I'm sorry, it should be it's still in the charts again.
Okay.
Ah, okay, I'm sorry.
Ivonda, would you like me to
Yeah,
turn
yeah,
to the...
it should be in the individual textual function and genre because it's more general. Like for example, the instruction of how to use computer or the tourism booklet. Uh, it is contextual and general, and also individual textual function or based on its function. Okay, that's the example of the explanation of overt and cover translation. If we put in this chart. Um, Yeah, that's all from my part. Hopefully it's understanding, and if you find it not, then we can discuss it later on. The next part will be explained by my friend Isma. Isma, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivonda.
Okay, thank you, Ivonda. Now I will talk about the concept, function, and amplification of filter, evident from contrastive analysis. Cultural filters means capturing cognitive and sociocultural differences in expectation and discourse practices between the source and target communities of language culture. Ideally, the application of such a filter shouldn't be based on the translator subjects and accidental intuitions, but as much as possible in line with the relevant empirical cross cultural studies. Next slide, please, Sam.
Can you see
Okay.
it?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
The concept of culture involves many different disciplines, and the definition depends on the frame of reference use. There are two basic concepts of culture. The first one is a humanity, and the second one is anthropology. The human concept of culture capture the cultural heritage, the community such as literature, art, and music. And for the anthropological concept of culture refers to the whole way of life in a community or society. Basically, it is form of what people keep in mind, their models, perceiving the language, associating the language, and interpreting them in other ways. Okay. Um, Besides that, there are two aspects of reflect and summarize many aspects of the concept of context that I have explained before. The first one is a cognitive aspect that basically guide and monitor human behavior and share by group members. And the second one is the social aspect that emphasize the traditional characteristic of being done. Okay, according to Sperber, 1996, social cognitive approach also can be used to explain a culture. Social cognitive can be seen as a contribution to solving the problems of culture generalization, diversification, relativization, and individualizations. Um, Sperber sees a culture in terms of different types of expressions, such as ideas, behaviors, attitudes, values, norms, and etc. According to him, give such a socio-cognitive approach to culture, there may be some justification in trying to describe culturally conditioned discourse phenomenon from the dialectically linked with ethic, culturally distant, and culturally intrinsic perspectives. Okay, next slide, please, Han. Okay, so when translator dealing with the particular culture context, it is important to the translator to know the expression refers to culturally specific political, institutional, social, economic, historical, and geographical phenomena. And at the same time, it is also necessary for the translator to know cultural preferences, mental preferences, and values. Beside, because when the translator translate the context, it's not based on her or um, his experience. For example, there are so many studies to cover the context. Okay, next, please, Han. Okay, here's the case for linguistic and cultural communities of German and Anglophone, where this type of research demonstrates how the notion of culture filter can be made more concrete and used as a device to explain or justify recontextualizations, measures undertaken by the translator in convert translation. Okay, next, please, Han. Okay, here's for the example. For the German sites in everyday situation and text types, German subjects tended to prefer expression expressing themselves in ways that are more direct, more explicit, more self references, and more content oriented. And for the discourse and text, they are focusing on the content of a message is frequently preferred, and they are often lean toward the editorial function. And for the allophone discourse, speakers tend to prefer an interactional, addresses, focused manner of expression. And also, allophone expression tend to emphasize the interpersonal function. Okay. So we can say that the use of language is linked to its socio-cultural context by assuming the dimension of intercultural differences in contextually verified text and discourse, practices that give substance to the concept of cultural filters. And discourse can be used to reflect deeper differences in culture and culture preference patterns. Okay, the next part will be delivered by Francisca.
Yeah, can
Francisca,
you
are
hear
you
me?
here?
Huh?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm here. Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yes.
okay.
Okay, thank you. So this is my part, which explain about translation and versions on the article. In translating, a text in one language is replaced by a functionally equivalent text in another language. Whether and how functional equivalence can be achieved critically depends on two empirically derived two types of translation, considering the relation of the target language text both to the translator and to the translator receiver. So House here uh, divided into two types of translation, which are overt version and also covert version. So on top of the distinction between overt translation and covert translation in the recontextualization process, it is so necessary to distinguish between translation and version in translation theory. So this difference is related to the idea of equality and the different types of equality that can be achieved in recontextualization. And next, let's please hand next. Yes. Let's take a look at the first version, which is overt version. In an overt translation, the receptors of the translation are quite overtly not being addressed. An overt translation is thus one which is overtly a translation, not a second original. Overt version is produced whenever a spatial function is overtly aided in the process of recontextualization. So, the source texts that fall under overt translation have an established worth in the source language community, like historical source texts related to specific occasion in which precisely specified source language, the audience that was being addressed, or maybe timeless source text. So in here, in the recontextualization theory described here, an overt version is generated whenever a specific function is aided overtly in the recontextualization process. According to House, there are two distinct cases of overt version production emerging. The first is when a translation is produced to reach a specific audience in a specific context. For example, like special editions for a young audience where the omission, the addition, simplification, or accentuation differ from certain features of source text. And then the second here, when the translation is given an additional particular purpose. For example, include resumes and abstracts where the version producer's clear goal is to convey the most essential parts or gist of the original. So all we have to know in the overt version here, in the translation, the reader knows that the text is a translation and recognize that it is bound to the source culture. Then next, next is covert version. In the case of covert translation text, it is thus both possible and desirable to keep the function of the source text equivalent to the translation text. This can be done by inserting a cultural filter between original and translation to account for cultural differences between two linguistic communities. Then, it is also a translation that enjoys the status of an original source text in the target culture. The translation is covered because it is not marked pragmatically as the translation text of a source text, but may conceivably have been created in its own right. So all we have to know about covered version here, it is like all commercial, scientific, and also like diplomatic translation come under this category. So there is no difference between the source language text and target language text for the source language text that is not bound to a specific culture. It is as if there were a single text in two language. Next, so this is three basic criteria for the validity of theory of translation recontextualization that explained also by the previous presenter from Ivond to explain about the validation of the translation recontextualization. So again, the researchers here wants to reclaim more that the provision of an elaborate categorical and metalinguistic apparatus for comparative contextualized analysis of text, and also the provision of the theoretical notion of the context derived over covert claim on which a translation is to be placed according to the type of text and context match itself. And also the provision of explicit means for distinguishing a translation from other types of multilingual textual operation. All three criteria are met in the proposed recontextualization theory of translation. And next, so here it is translation as recontextualization under the influence of English as a global lingua franca. In globalization and internationalization, which continue to increase today in many aspects of contemporary life, there is also a growing demand for text simultaneously intended for recipients in many different linguistic and cultural contexts. However, due to the worldwide political, economic, scientific, and cultural dominance of the English language, especially in its function as a lingua franca, the trend towards cultural universalism or cultural naturalism is actually a deviation from Anglo-American norms has been moved. And then in the coming decades, the conflict between cultural universalism driven by the need and global dissemination of information on the one hand, and the specificity of cultures that cater to local needs will become more pronounced, while the influence of the English language, the lexic, has long been recognized and lamented by many. The Anglophone influence on pragmatics and discourse is hardly recognized and adequately researched. So, next, Ham. One of the first steps in this direction has been met in a project currently funded by the German Research Foundation into the influence of English as a global lingua franca on German, French, and Spanish translation and comparable texts. The analysis shows that German communicative preference, unlike French and Spanish, have undergone a change under the influence of English over the last 25 years. So here House provides two brief examples from the corpus of popular science to illustrate this trend. But here I put one of those examples here. We can see that Michael Rose that aging and then the description is anti-aging therapies of the future will undoubtedly have to counter many destructive biochemical processes at once. And then it's German translation after that. I don't know how to pronounce it, as you can read on the screen. And then the description here, effective therapists must, however, take up the fight against many destructive chemical processes simultaneously. So in this example, the position of the subject in the German translation indicates the influence of the English language, whereas a non-living noun as an agent in the subject position is routinely possible in English. It is characterized in German in this genre. So the German translation shows that uh, the Anglophone convention for personalizing an inanimate abstract entity that was adopted, adding to text and eliciting a potentially more emotive affective response from the recipient. So in German, passive would be an undersigned construct. So what we have to know about is that it plays an important role in the translation that can show about here and on the German translation. Go to the next slide. It is about conclusion. So the difference between overt and covert translation is shown to reflect very different ways of accomplishing this task of recontextualization. The original context is reactivated alongside the target context in an overt translation. Thus, different worlds of concepts are transposed in the medium of the target language, while covert translation concentrates exclusively on the target context. It uses cultural filters to account for communicative norms derived from the new recipient context. And then by the combination of structure, pragmatics, and Halidayan systematic functional linguistic are preferred over philosophical, psychological, pragmatic, sociolinguistic, and also conversational analytic approaches because notions are perceptible for written text and thus for the theory of translation as recontextualization. So uh, I will back the the part to the hand again.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think that was our presentation, and I hope that it was clear for you. I know the article was quite complicated,
No.
sophisticated one. We tried to make it as simple as we could, but still not that easy. Um, I hope we delivered it quite successfully. Then, Mualimin, go please. Please give us your feedback.
Okay, thank you, Han, and other presenters for. I think it's wonderful presentation. It means that it covers. If we looking at the article, actually, it covers almost all of the coverage in translation. In And I think this translation, let's leave more focus on um, interpretation in interpreting, which is really in just like in a dialogue, or usually in interpreting someone explain or speak, yeah, in a spoken language mostly, and then later on the translator or the interpreter have to explain, yeah, in a different language what has been said by the the speaker. Of course, because just like in pragmatics, usually uh, the meaning, yeah, of what is said is not always the meaning literally. Okay, so let's say like um, maybe when we do interpreting, yeah, when we do interpreting, because interpreting covering not only written text but also spoken text. So we should be careful once again, because in pragmatics, when we say something, actually we do something as well. So in pragmatic, the point is that doing something with words. Actually, you do something, but in words or with word. Yeah. That's the what is it? According to the Searle, yeah, sorry, Austen, yeah, Austen said that when we say something, we do something, and I think in the spoken text, there are many things, not only literal meaning, of course. Just like, okay, I start from pragmatics because I know more in pragmatics. Okay, in pragmatic, when let's say someone ask you this one, or talk to you like this one, can you help me? Or maybe that's it's too direct. I need your hand. Okay, I need your hand, but not hand names. Okay, I need your hands. Um, so it doesn't mean that he needs his hand or her hand. Of course not. Yeah. So hand here means help. Yeah. So again, when we have to do interpreting, yeah, we should be really critical. What does the speaker means? Not only by looking at the words, but also the intention of the speaker. So that's why this, you know that this writer, who's the writer of this?
Just a minute, but I think his name is
Julia.
yes, Juliane House.
Yeah, House is really yeah, one of the expert in pragmatic as well. So
Yes.
Julian House tried to combine what is, I think, what has been talked so far in our class related to more than written text, and it doesn't cover like pragmatics or even um, what is called uh, by Speber and Wilson, yeah, relevance. Those are related to pragmatics. In House, yeah, is really one of the expert in pragmatic as well. So when she talked about translation, I think she tried to cover not only the text, what we have discussed so far, maybe because, but also covers their spoken text. when we do end up writing, once again, we do not always based on the words spoken, but on the context. So I think this, and also House also relate to Hallelian tradition, yeah, on holiday means that, yeah, I think we have seen from there. So here House try to discuss as translation in many related aspect, many related contexts, many related theory, yeah, not only based on their text or written text, because actually, according to Halliday, when what is text is not always written. What is text is not always written. Yeah. So in general, let's say the common people would say that text is written, but in fact, text is only not only written, but it can be spoken as well. In how to understand the spoken text, it covers many things. It covers many theories other than the theory of translation per se, what is what have been so far we discussed. So I think, yeah, I think this article is really cover many things, many things. Okay, looking at the, okay, from the beginning, like in philosophical tradition, yeah, back from the
Just a
beginning,
minute.
let's say. Uh, yeah, here we go. Yeah, Austen, yeah, of course. When we talk about language, Austen, we always quote Austen and Wittgenstein is German. He's German. This one is oh, I forgot. But anyway, Austen is really yeah, the father, let's say, the founding fathers of pragmatic, which is very well known with speech act. Just like what I said, that according to Austen, when we say a word, we actually we do something. So that way, his book is how to do things with words, how to do things with word. The because his philosophy, his philosopher, sorry, and then almost every word, every utterance we say related to mm, uh, uh, something behind the words. Yeah, so that way, like in Christ, say you mentioned Christ as well. Christ belonged to, in what one? In what tradition?
Psychological one.
Psychological. Okay. Christ also based on Austen as well, actually. And based on Christ, we call as maxim. There are four maxim: maxim of quality, maxim of quantity, maxim of relation, and maxim of there are four maxim. And I think in life, yeah, in life we tend to what is it, against the principle. But I think the principle is really good because we want to know why we against the principle, or we what is that, instead of against, but uh, what is it, oh my goodness, the word follow the maxim or not. Let's say, like, I'll give you an example of one maxim, of about maxim. An example, let's say when someone says, um, would you like to come to my party? Okay, and then the answer is I'm really busy this week. Well, looking at this one, this two utterance, I mean the second utterance doesn't really comply or answer the first utterance. Would you like to come to my party? Is an invitation, and I think the formal or the what's that? The expression need an answer, yes or no. Okay, but what the person says, I'm really busy this week. It doesn't really answer the questions, but we may say that there is a relation, but not really direct relation. So I think this answer is not. I mean, doesn't. What is it? Oh my goodness! In Christ term. So doesn't really answer the question. Doesn't really. Let's say from would you come to my party is invitations or reviews or yeah, want to go, want to the party. But the other person says I'm really busy this. So I think it's only, well, we may have implication, of course. It implies that, I mean, the second person, I'm sorry I can, but because I'm really busy this week. Yeah, but again, to have this implied meaning, of course, you should know. And I think the way in spoken one, the way he expressed, yes, show that he reviews or he would go to the party. Yeah, but again, accept or reviews. Yeah, but again, I think intonation also take part. Yeah, let's say if here the second person's intonation is different. I mean, with high tone, it can be expressive. It can be angry, showing anger. Not only reviews, but take adhere to other actions as a response to the invitation. Okay, that's I think. Well, I'm really happy to have this article discussed in this class because House tried to show us that when we do in translating text, once again, not always written text, but it is spoken text. It is not as simple as an activity, not simple activity, but it covers many things to reconsider. And I think that's what comes to my mind by reading this one. So it covers many things, yeah, philosophy, and then pragmatics, and then psychology. In what tradition? What the tradition?
Here are the what? Just uh,
Yeah,
philosophical.
philosophical. Yeah, Western psychology, Western pragmatic tradition, socialistic, and then functional. Okay, well, this cover this. Well, the coverage is really wide here, and because if we talk about sociolinguistics and anthropological conversation or analytical tradition, well, this covers almost everything. And then functional Halatian, um, um, yeah, he divide into three mode, tenor, and what is it?
Just a minute. I think it was presented by
Halatian,
Ivond.
functional, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think related to field mode and tenor. Bu Adeli is the master on it, on this one, because we also are, let's say, yeah, her one of her interests on this one as well, on Halletian tradition, which is really to, so when we talk about a sentence or an utterance, you should think of tenor, field, and mode. Yeah. So so every language, or any language or any expression that we use, we may analyze based on certain certain concept. Because like this one, and the word context, I think Halletian is popular for what we call as other than context, but cortex and context. Cortex mean the written one. Let's say in a sentence, let's say the relation between one word to another, what we call as what he calls as cortex. But context mean the relation between the words and its surrounding situation. So context could be related to the person, to the setting, yeah, and not only physical setting, but also a psychological setting. Yeah. So beyond the language, that's the context mean, because so far in common people say context related to once again written text context, but actually according to Halliday, context mean other than the words. Yeah, relate the words with other than words. The it can be setting and so on. Yeah. So I do agree. This article, I think, that this covers many things in translation activities. Okay, that's what I know. But well, of course, we need to learn more. Of course, I myself want to learn more about the diagram. Yeah, I'm not really. Yeah, I know a little bit, but just show me the diagram.
Just a minute.
Okay, between register and genre. You may check with dictionary or what is it other than dictionary, which is uh, dictionary is one language. What is about the terms? What is it?
Field, tenor, and mood.
No. I mean related to box, yeah. But it covers not only if just. Oh my goodness. It's like dictionary, but it covers more general one. Usually, dictionary is only on certain language, right? Uh, like Britannica.
Encyclopedia.
Oh, that's good.
Wikipedia.
Encyclopedia. Yeah, I forgot the word. Yeah, encyclopedia. I think you may try to find, but usually linguistics or dictionary. Yeah, linguistic dictionary may cover all this term here. At least in Halletian. Can you make it bigger so we can see?
Just a minute. This one, right?
Yeah, this table, this graph, yeah. So we can, Yeah, can you make why the this one the page is?
This one.
Yeah, no, yeah, as big as this one.
This one. Here it is.
Yeah, it's clear. Okay, once again, based on about functional linguistics, or we call it as SFL, systemic functional linguistic (SFL), and then Pudel is one of the expert in faculty, and he has written related to funcs SFL. Once I joined their organization, it was established in Jakarta, but only sometime I once or twice I was in charge of being supervisor of some student writing based on SFL. But here, looking at this one, when we talk about register, of course, we should think of field, tenor, and mode. Field related to subject matter or social action, and then tenor related to the relationship among the participant, and then also social role and social attitude as well in tenor, the principle on that one, and then mode related to the medium that we use. It can be simple or complex, and then of course in this one we talk about cohesive on cohesion. So I think cohesive on cohesion and coherent usually in a small part when we talk about paragraph. Yeah, that's I mean a good paragraph should be coherent. There is relation between one sentence to another, and it should be well written as a paragraph. There should be cohesive devices there, and then let's say I'll give an example like um, if you hear this sentence, he is smart, yeah, he is smart but clever. Sorry, he is rich but smart. Do you think it's
It's
um,
rich.
let's say he is or she is, yeah, she is beautiful but she is smart. So do you think that is this make sense?
No, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think if we use the she is smart and she's beautiful and smart, okay, this must be logical, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so this only an example how uh, an expression, a word using only, I mean the conjunction we use here is not the appropriate one. Usually we use negative, um, and we use positive, and then we use but. It should be a negative, right? So it's good, but okay, bad. But never say good and good but good. Okay. So that is the relationship between on cohesion and coherence. And of course, when we talk about text in general, we should cover not only register about the genre. I think like yeah, there are, well, you can check on encyclopedia about genre. Um, and then so language tag here cover both register and genre as well. So looking at the arrow here, yeah, text, and then covers this one, both register and genre, and mix um, yeah, a text which is really functional, yeah. Um, yeah, I think, yeah, go on with the form. Tenor captures social attitude, different styles such as formal, non-formal. That's belong to tenor, consultative, or formal. That's the tenor. Yeah. Mode mean participation can be simple, can be monologue. Yeah, with no addressee, but can be dialogue. Yeah. Um, and then up there about the field, maybe from different page. Yeah.
Yes, bro. Can you see it, bro?
Okay, yeah, here field, yeah, social activity topics, um, with whether it is general or specific, and then turn refers to nature of participant and relation between them, between the participant. And of course, there is usually when we talk about the relation between speakers, there can be social power, also social distance, and also degree of emotional charge. In politeness, they got what we call as uh, power, distance, and oh my goodness, I forgot the other one. Imposition, yeah. Imposition related to this one, yeah. And then modes, one again, related to either spoken or written. I think every text, they have their own features, yeah. Just like usually spoken text is we have several word repeated most, yeah. And then our sentence usually is not complete, subject, verb, object, and so on. And maybe we just mention one word and then we yeah, speak, we mention some other different words, yeah. And yeah, just what comes to our mind. And let's say if you want to know how we speak, you may have a transcript of your work, of your um, spoken text, and then make recording of that, and then you try to transcribe it, and you will find some features that are, yeah, on our speech. And then I think we may have in sociolinguistic, everyone has its own way of using the language, what we call as ideologues. Ideologue, the style of using the language from individually. But dialects mean cover someone in a certain region, in a certain groups. But when the style referred to individual, we call it as ideologues. And I think again, this House, yeah, Juliane House, is really has written a good topic, a good article, and I think I would say this could be one of a good article for you to learn when you do translation. Yeah, at least you consider this article can be the one of the basic concepts. Yeah, when we do, I think this more related to spoken translation, just like interpreting. But of course, it's also related to written one. Okay, because usually when we talk about translation, we mostly talk about written text. Yeah. But remember that when we do translation, actually, we may just like what we have so far. Yeah? When we do like select subtitling, yeah, subtitling, I think it's mostly to interpreting uh, other than translating, because usually about equivalence and so on. Like say just like I remember um, an example of how, yeah, Indonesian learning English, yeah, greets an English speaker by using Indonesian context. The dialogue is like this one. Mister, where are you? Let's say, where are you going? As you know that the one who asks questions, he or she doesn't know who he is. I mean, they don't know each other. They are strangers. And then, well, actually, that's the Indonesian one. Say, Mister, where are you going? Indonesian context, when someone asks you this one, it's the same as in Bahasa. In Bahasa, we call it as it's actually it's not ask question at all, just like greeting, yeah. Hi, the same as hi, but again, the native speakers of English, he doesn't know the language of or the culture of Bahasa of Indonesian. So when we usually if we know each other, that would be fine, asking where are you going. But if you don't know each other, it can be problems because they are strangers. So you won't get. So there is misunderstanding here about cross-cultural understanding. Yeah. Just like questioning how old are you, maybe in some other culture, it's not really polite asking someone's age, especially women. Yeah, but in some other cultures, it's okay. But when there is no equivalent culture there, no equivalence using the unequivalence translation, it might be a problem. Okay, well, thank you to make you stay longer. Okay, any question on this one? Hello, are you still?
Thank you so much, Bob.
It's okay. It's okay, everyone. We do hope that you have learned something uh, from this discussion. Well, everyone, I think this is our last meeting with me. I mean, before the meet test. And then when is the meet test?
Next week, sir.
Next week, on the same day.
Yes.
Okay, I haven't talked to Pak Prihanto as well to talk about to Pak Agus related to what kind of exam it will be given, or whether I think if I may give suggestion, it could be like can be once again, yeah, can be in the form of what is it? Oh my goodness. Yeah, I forget the words. It can be questions, and then you should answer in 1 or 2, not 1 or 2 hours, in one day maybe. So but again, you do not only a copy from a book, but you should explains with your own words, and you should give examples. Yeah. So essay, but not really essay, because in the form of essay, but let's say your example should be based on your own findings. So make sure that you don't copy someone's answer. That's the point actually. Okay, just I think once again, thank you so much for having with me. But anyway, I don't know. Yeah, I think if there is something information, something to you, for something important for you to know, to understand, and then I'll at least to contact Han as one of the coordinator, or may I think I may share with Yvonne and Siska and the others. Yeah, but make sure that, yeah, keep in touch for that one. Okay, once again, thank you so much. Have a nice day to you all. See
Thank you
you.
so much.
You're welcome, Francisca. You're welcome, Hen, Bivanda,
Thank you so much.
Hazel, Nurul, and Sadaf and Sarfaras. Thank you. Sorry, I'm leaving.
Yeah, have a great day and take good care of yourself, please. Thank you.